All right, Jeremy is on. He's just joining us now.
Hi.
Hey, sorry about it. I don't know why I couldn't find you.
That's okay.
So,
I never done this.
yeah, me neither. I just tried it this morning actually on my personal Instagram account and was just filming out of my window. But there you go. So we're here. I was just showing everyone the entrance to the gallery. As I was explaining, we're a car park underground, and it's a bit of a strange kind of path to get to. But then
Right.
this is sort of the entrance to the space. And the first work that is on view here, which is called Ling on the Hands. And could you explain a little bit about it and the subject?
Sure. Sure. No, I'm distracted by all this scrolling comments. Hi, Calvin.
Oh,
Um,
thanks, Alan.
yeah, like these come from a series that are quite related to the next works we're going to see that are kind of the majority of the show. But these are like a two-dimensional version of a series titled Illustrated Rapture Catalog, in which I take archival materials, documentary footage of people experiencing some type of rapture, be it technological or hedonistic or spiritual, and then I rephotograph it under a piece of a prism, basically like a chunk of a kaleidoscope, and then print them as silkscreens, reformat them to like a pop poster size. And so what you're seeing is this kind of wide range of topics get flattened under the, or not of topics necessarily, but of subjects get flattened under the same lens. So it's like taking something scientific, something spiritual, something hedonistic, and treating it with this same cliche sort of way of. It's like a cliche way of mediating or of illustrating altered states in media is using a prism or a kaleidoscope. So it's just kind of a survey of these images that then get printed into a larger format.
And this is sorry.
No,
Sorry, I
but
had a glitch in the connection. I couldn't hear. This is this is a silk screen, and the subject here is this kind of moment, almost like a blessing, right? In this sort of religious
yeah,
act where people kind of.
it's a Pentecostal thing generally, I think. Sort of they call it the laying of the hands, where you are kind of basically you're either sheltering someone or kind of supporting them during their moment of catharsis. You know, the boy in the middle here is having some type of apparent transcendental experience, and the men around him are either sheltering or supporting or potentially maybe feeding off this as well. But yeah, I mean, it's a bit misleading to just see one of them on their own, because there's, you know, oftentimes I would have this next to, I don't know, someone wearing VR glasses with the same kind of prismatic effect. But yeah, it's like I said, it's like just kind of a flat version of the works that are inside the gallery, but more in a.
So actually, to this point, for the people watching us, you can swipe up. I mean, when we sort of save this video in our story, we'll have the swipe up feature. But if you go on our website, on the editions website, we have the image of another work, which is also an edition of the same series, but shows another subject, which is the snakes, right? The handling of the snakes. So, yeah, if people want to see another example of this of these works, they can have a look on the König edition. We have some more there on view, but we couldn't include it in the show because, we only had one.
Right.
And I was wondering if you could talk about maybe just the title, Selected Facets, and translation. What are the facets would be sort of the experiences in the translation? Could you explain why you chose to use these terms?
Sorry, I keep reading the comments and like friends are having conversations. Hi, Maeve and Richard. Yes. Well, the show is intended to be a kind of a companion to. I had a series of video installation shows that were set to be running in parallel to this.
Yeah.
The first one at the Pompidou opened for 2.5 weeks, but has since been closed. And then there was meant to be one at the Swiss Institute right now, as well as the Julius Stoschek collection in Berlin. So this was meant to just show a kind of just a side of my practice that wasn't included in those shows, more physical studio-based works. So selected facets just being a kind of, facet is a kind of nebulous word. The works inside the prisms, people often refer to the sides of the prism as facets. But a facet being just to me, it's generally just a side of your practice, an area, a facet of something, facet of your personality, etc. And translation is just what my work is about. Generally, I think is translation and this attempt to. Is there a way for me to turn off the comments?
Let's see.
Sorry. The translation. A general theme throughout my body of work is the attempt and oftentimes the failure of translating profound experience or transcendental experience or to a visual form or even to a text-based form or just the notion of translating things back to each other as humans. Like the attempt and the failure is something I often celebrate. So the title is just a combination of a few things, and also the works in the show are coming from a quite a long time through my practice. That I think the first work started in 2008, and some of the new ones are 2020. So there's like a 12-year span in this exhibition. So the title was meant to not mean a lot, to be honest.
Okay, well, I guess it's a very particular situation because this year has been a year that you've worked towards some quite important shows, and the show in the Pompidou, for example, which was traveling to New York as well. And these circumstances are just so unusual, and this show here in London wasn't planned to be. It was planned to be sort of like a contextualizing exhibition. For people who, would then go on to see the show at the Pompidou, hopefully. And now in the end, this is, I guess, the show that people can now access virtually. But it's been quite an important year for you, I guess. Thankfully, there's a monograph from the Pompidou show, which remains corona free. So, here I have it here. Yeah. So for those interested in seeing the monograph and who haven't had the chance to see the show at the Pompidou, we also have it on our gallery. You can find under the publications, we have this book. So I think it's really good to give people kind of access to this exhibition, which was really a huge, just a massive success for the 2 weeks that it was on view. So, we've heard really good feedbacks. But how was it for you to have this quite short-lived experience of having your show closed? I imagine it must have been quite annoying. It was just like a bit, it's a bit anticlimactic because I worked on this piece really heavily basically we started shooting last April. So it was like a 9-month really intense process because it's a 7-channel installation with 7 independent audio tracks and then a collective audio track and lighting effects and stuff. It's quite ambitious compared to what I'm used to. So, and then it opened really well. We had a really great opening and so it was a bit anticlimactic, but it was luckily it got open and there was a considerable amount of people that saw the show
and the work will live. You know, I mean, all the shows have just been
Exactly.
postponed. So yeah, it's okay. It's like I had planned this year to be so insane with all these other shows, and now it's kind of like just stopped quite dead. So I'm having trouble getting anything done at the moment, to be honest.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But
Can you talk a little bit about the work in Paris and what it's about? Because it's sort of like a almost it's not really a documentary, but it kind of shows itself, travels through different time frames and right,
yeah,
there's like an overlap between space and time and
it's a 7-channel work. If anyone's familiar with my previous works, it plays with time and with it's a temporality of media. So each work looks like it comes from a specific era, ranging from the like mid 60s to the mid 90s. And so they all play out as these sort of documentaries of groups who are engaged in some type of embodied movement-based practice. And so they all read as though they're archival, but there's a narrator who unifies the whole piece, and he speaks on each one. And he's detailing these groups as coming from the future, from 50 to 200 years ahead in time. So there's a lot of sort of cognitive dissonance involved with the way that it's presented to you. And and so these groups, they carry on their own. It's like 7 individual films, completely independent, looping. And every 20 minutes, they start to unravel into this kind of ecstatic moment. And at that moment, the sound starts to come from all around the room until there's a real key sync moment, and everything on all screens synchronizes. And these 7 disparate groups of people start doing the same choreographic dance. So it goes through this 5-minute, that's the image of it right there. If you go back, there's it's like 5 minutes of a no, one more or 2 more.
this one? Yeah.
That one and the next one. Yeah, there's like a 5-minute music video kind of choreography that takes over, consumes this entire space. And so these 7 groups from across different eras in time kind of have this cross-temporal sync, which goes on. And then it, like the past 3 films of mine, it totally ruptures and everything goes completely digital. You know, these works that are on 16 millimeter and VHS and high 8 all of a sudden turn totally contemporary into this digital meltdown and carries on from there.
Yeah, so it's like a moment where these different time frames kind of flatten and sort of sync together.
Yeah, they really, there's like it's like they kind of somehow, there's like a freak alignment across, the work is about belief and about people's belief, being able to alter their reality, physically alter their reality. And so it's kind of like this moment of a poetic kind of synchronization.
And I like also this notion of there being a narrator, which is also, this is part of these are stills from DMT, which is another film that you made. And there's also, I mean, the narrator in this case is the person who's experiencing this trip. So it's a film that has subjects experiencing a trip on DMT, and then they narrate what they were going through, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's like 16 years ago. But that's, yes, that's people who I gave the drug DMT to. The only thing they were instructed to do is when they started to come down from that drug, which happens incredibly quickly, that drug hits you. And within a minute, if it's hitting you correctly, within a minute, you're incapacitated and sort of not engaging with reality as we know it.
Yeah.
And when you come down, it's a similar thing. You start to feel it wearing off, and then within a minute, you're sober again. So the only instructions with that work was that when people started to feel like they were coming off the drug, was they started to just try and describe what happened. And so what you read while you're watching the videos is I gotta stop looking at the comments. you're reading subtitles of them attempting to put it back together immediately following the trip. So the language is totally broken and disjointed a lot of the time. And that was a real early, it's quite a key moment for me in gaining an interest in this notion of translation and of these attempts to elucidate profound or transcendental or psychedelic experiences and the real failure of language in being able to do this. And so that's really what that work was about.
Yeah, I guess it's like the strength of sort of like surreal language and almost Dadaism in a way that, you know, these words just kind of blurt out, but they actually are so significant and they sort of come from within, right? It's where language kind of falls apart, but has a reason for that. Anyway, so okay, that was a little interrupting side note on the show, but let's go back to the actual show. I'll come to the back of the room to give people a good sort of view of the entire space. So here we are. This is kind of a broad sort of view of the exhibition. And on this wall, we have the series of prisms, which you were talking about earlier, with a silk screen, which is kind of like a flattened version of the prisms. And these, can you explain a little bit how you made them, how you actually constructed these? Because you build a specific resin sort of facet, I guess we can say, to the work, which focuses on a particular part of the image that you choose. Or I don't know. I don't want to go too in depth with the sort of more technological part of it. Maybe you can explain how you build them and how they're made.
Well, they're made always specifically for each image. So I collect these images. I buy these images from newspaper archives. So they're these generally unique images from I don't know. I think the earliest ones I have come from the 1930s all the way up to pretty much like the mid 90s is about the latest. And so I'm looking for images of people experiencing some type of transcendental or some type of actually I'll get back to that. Anyways, I choose the images first, and then technically I select the area of the work where it appears to be the kind of, I don't know, the most sort of the concentration of this energy or something I'm looking for. And from there, the photo is scanned, and then we have a program that my friend created in Cinema 4D that where we can basically choose the size of the opening and the amount of facets that go around, the depth of the acrylic, etc. So each work is always unique and made specifically for the image behind it. That is then sent to a place that cuts the acrylic out of a block of acrylic, and then polishes it down to this level. So that's the process really. It's done on a computer really. The designing of the prism itself and how many sides and where the image is going to get fractured.
So we get this sort of cool impression that there's also depth, that the same sort of volume that goes outwards also goes inwards. Is this just it's just a visual effect?
That's just optical. Yeah, they're flat on the back. They're flat, and there's about a 6 centimeter gap from the image to the prism itself. In Paris, actually, it's the first time we've shown. These ones are all about. I'm not sure the measurement. More like, I don't know. Do you know the measurements?
Yeah, I know the measurements. They're like, like 38, 40, 43 centimeters.
Yeah, so we have ones in Paris now that are about 5 times that size. It's the first time we've gone really, really large with them, and they're around, I don't know, 80 by 90 or something like that. They're really, really quite big. But yeah, the concept of the work is this. It's been this. I started making these in 2016, and it was because I'd accumulated this kind of archive of photos of either people, like this is a whirling dervish, people engaging in some type of cathartic practice, or some type of technological thing like the one you first saw.
Yeah.
I have many with people in VR. Here we have a sort of a mystical, clairvoyant type of image. A woman seems to be doing some type of somatic or mystical work on this woman. There's oftentimes information on the back of the photos. But yeah, so I've been collecting a lot of these images for many years, and this is kind of it's like a again, similar to what I was saying about the silk screen, it's a way of treating all these images the same, regardless of whether they're yoga or religion or hedonistic practice of some sort. There's lots from raves and 60s be-ins, etc., drug culture and VR, etc. So putting them all under the same type of lens, really, and looking for a similarity. The title of the work is called Towards Universal Pattern Recognition, and they're always under that umbrella. So it's, again, it's similar to my films in that there's this flattening, there's this loss of hierarchy between religion, science, experience, hedonism, mysticism, etc., trying to create a sort of environment where these are all treated equally. That's a man meditating.
Yeah, I really like these two together, this man meditating and then the cheerleader, which is, another type of transcendence, another type of belief, and, which falls very much within like the popular kind of contemporary notion of culture, and others are more traditional, notions of belief or, follow a sort of, kind of like stricter format. So let's move on to the film.
Sure.
Because we've been talking about the films, and here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so maybe
let's see if
difficult
this is
to
a good angle. Can you see it?
Sure. Yeah, I can see it. So this is a work that started in 2008, and it's an archive of vortexes. Anytime in a film or a television show that you see a spiraling, tunneling, wormhole, vortex-like representation, I take it from the film and add it to this work, which is titled "This Transition Will Never End."
Yeah.
So I think it's around 20 minutes at the moment, and so it's basically, it's again this idea of translation and representation of altered states, and the fact that this cliche or this trope of illustrating the transition from one state to another, be it a dream state or taking drugs or time travel, etc. It's something that everyone seems to agree on. Like we all know what this means when we see it.
Yeah.
It's basically it's a trope that we all you instantly know what's happening, and you see it from, as you see in this thing, you see it from Oscar-winning films to like the lowest budget B movies and television programs, and yet we all, it's somehow given a pass. Like this is the way we do it. So it's just it also becomes an archive of special effects and the history of special effects, because we have there's one in here called the Time Tunnel, which is from like the early 50s, I think, where it's like it's actual physical construction of a vortex, all the way up to like 2001, and then into like Tron and things with early computer graphics, up to something like this, which I think is from the TV show Sliders, which was like a really pretty bad 90s television program. And so here they've got like a pretty hokey CGI vortex. Yeah. And it's just just furthers this notion of
kind
of
Hello?
Yeah, it's infinite. Hi.
Sorry, I'm not sure whether my connection is glitchy. But yeah, it's this, you're constantly kind of jumping into another time or space. It's quite a cool concept to be in this constant transition, right? This transition will never end. And then this work, so these works are Polaroids that you used a particular technique to take an image of your thumb. Could you explain a little bit how that was?
My index
Or
finger,
it's your
yeah.
index? Sorry, your index.
Yeah. It's a type of photography called Kirlian photography, which is an electrophotography that was invented in the 1930s by a Russian named Semyon Kirlian. And what it does is it records an image on a negative by electrocuting it, basically. So if you have a charge and a copper plate, and then you put the negative of the film on the copper plate, and it charges through it, basically electrocuting this object and capturing what they call what is known as the electrical coronal discharge, what exists around objects. So it's something that exists around everything. It's like a sort of a force field of sorts. And so they attempted in the 1960s to introduce this in science and medicine as a way of they were looking for a way to be able to read this and use it for the benefits somehow. But it's too unstable. Like you can't find a control, so it can't be used in an empirical way because it's just too wily to control it. So it's been taken in more by mystical and esoteric types, and as a type of an aura camera, not like the ones that you see in the esoteric fairs with the colors all around, which are more heat based. But this is actually it's literally capturing. Like when I put my finger on the piece of negative, it's electrocuting it in a similar way to when you touch a Tesla ball, and the electricity goes to your hand. So it's basically recording that moment. So these works are me experimenting with this device and while listening to music. So I listen to music on headphones, and at a certain point in each song, in a pitch black room, because it's a color-based photo thing, I have my finger on the camera and on the film, and at a certain point in each song I charge it and capture this discharge around my finger or this aura during each specific song. So it's like a poetic sort of notion of mediating music to a visual form. And so these here are big grids of 100, and so I'm listening to songs from the Billboard Hot 100 charts here. So the sort of definitive American list of pop music for a year. I'm at the first one on the left is the control, where I'm not listening to music at all, and then I go through 100 songs, testing.
Oh, right. Okay.
Sort of the
so this
seeing
is
if
kind
there's
of
a difference. So that's without it.
That's
okay. No music. Yeah.
No
right
music.
There. And then I go through, and I think one of those is 1969. So it's it's Billboard for 1969.
This one, yeah.
And then the other one is actually the Hot 100 love songs of all time. So I think they start. I'm not sure what year Billboard started, but it's the biggest love songs of all time, up to I think maybe 2015 or something. No. Sorry, I made that in 2014. So it must be till 2013 or so. That was made specifically for an exhibition in Ireland that was about love. So these are quite, I started doing that process in 2011 so it was at a moment where I had actually, I used to have a parallel music career of sorts. Yeah. And so it was at a moment in 2010, I stopped making music professionally, but was still really interested in it being part of my practice. So this was kind of one of the early ways of maintaining, music as an element in my work, as well as,
And did you record or did you write down behind each Polaroid which song you were listening to? Is there a way
no, there's a graph, I have a list, so I can send it to you. Actually, I think I said I would do that. So you can go through there and see which one is, which Polaroid corresponds to. I will always love you and etc. But sometimes I will take the negative and also blow it up really large, like poster scale. And with those ones, when I'm doing it with a single song, I generally tend to go to more, well, not necessarily Billboard Hot 100 songs, more songs that I find to be cathartic songs of some sort, so they'll be just like, I don't know how to describe that, but they'll be like, I'll listen to a slow dive record or something a little more left field, and then take the image and blow it up to this really pop format. So then I like the idea that these kind of obscure songs then become posters similar to sort of, I don't know, what you would see with a Justin Timberlake poster and someone, or Justin Bieber poster.
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's a format that's
just
kind
of, taking it back to pop, I think is fun with those works.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's something I continue doing. Loveless. I continue doing those when I have time, actually, because I really enjoy that. I also do them. There's actually a show in London right now that has 3 of those at Somerset House, but it's a show about mushrooms that Francesca Gavin curated.
Yes.
Because I've also done these using psychedelic truffles and mushrooms on the like taking Kirlian photos of that. So it's also this way of discovering this kind of unseen potential of this psychedelic plant. And the images themselves end up coming out looking really within the parameters of what we consider psychedelic imagery. So there's a funny kind of cyclical motion going on there. Yeah, they're really abstract when you're using like my finger is flat, so it sits directly on the surface.
Right.
But when I take the images of these truffles that are very bumpy and sort of they don't sit flat, it gives you this really abstract this really abstract image. Hi friend, hi Denai.
That's
so
cool.
that
Okay.
so sort of in this kind of attempt to discover the unseen psychedelic potential of these plants, you end up with this kind of almost cliche image, or sort of
of what people
of what
think.
What psychedelic looks
like.
like.
Okay. Well, should we open up for questions? I'm not sure how this works. Let's see. All right, I've got a few questions. Oh, someone's asked.
Someone's saying turn off the comments.
Yeah, I don't know if I can do that. Should we do this kind of deeper one? Hi,
Which
Sophie
one?
and Jeremy. Your subject brings transcendental experience. Has creating work under this theme triggered any spiritual breakthroughs? What do you think?
I think I've been dealing with this subject for a long time, or I had to answer a question about when I got interested in these types of things, and I can track it all the way back to being as a kid. Like I was raised Catholic, and so there was always this sense of something greater, or something beyond. And then when I was even really young, I would play these games where we would knock ourselves out. We would choke each other until we would black out, and come back, like you'd been in some kind of a daze. So it was like an early form of I don't know, attempting to sort of escape this reality for a moment. And then, like the usual, got into drugs, etc. But I think the work, I became more and more interested in other people's experiences beyond my own, and then into this notion, this universality of it, of humanity, this notion of this sort of age-old notion of transcendence, and what the infinite amounts of interpretations of that, and ways people try and attain it, and then the ways people try and explain it as well. So I got very interested in science, and how science is attempting to discover or map the brain during these experiences. So I don't necessarily think it's unlocked something in myself personally, but you know, I have my own beliefs and yeah, ways of going about things, but it's just given me a much I don't know, it's kind of infinitely interesting to me and fascinating the way that everyone does their own goes about their own way of attempting to find something beyond or to explain it or to totally deny it. Yeah, so I'm kind of interested in all aspects.
So this in your work you talk a lot about quantification, right? Which would be the sort of scientific explanation of these experiences, and how by giving it a scientific explanation, it kind of would undermine, you know, the maybe the belief or the existence of like God, if this transcendence can be quantified and scientifically explained, then it kind of, or
no, that's no, you're right.
Is this kind of like the gist of what quantification
is?
means?
Quantification is something I invented for the films, the Quantification trilogy.
Yeah.
And it was a way to be able to discuss all of these things I wanted to discuss. And so the quantification is a scientific discovery that all spiritual experiences is an identical set of neural synapse firings in the brain. So they basically track what every single spiritual experience is. They can basically explain it. And so at this point, you know, if science, this is the kind of a question I've been thinking about, I think, since I was quite young, is like, if science comes to a point where it can sort of reduce spiritual experience to a equation, does that discount these experiences?
Yeah.
Like, does that then discredit anytime people have seen a vision of God, etc., or does it enforce it? You know, so that's something, that's constantly kind of at play in these films, and in the films, people have generally discounted it and abandoned religion, and so that, or spirituality, and so that's the premise of these films, is that in this abandoning of spirituality, humanity then starts to discover that that faith and belief had become an essential aspect of human survival, and so they're struggling to figure out a way to regain some type of faith or belief. But they're under the banner of science fiction, they're very there's a lot going on.
Yeah. Should we see if there's another question? Oh, turn off the comment. Is there?
Hold on, I'm just gonna plug this in.
Oh.
Sorry, go ahead. You can get it.
Okay, maybe this one. What motivated you to move to Berlin? How does the city influence your practice?
What motivated me? I think I had spent a lot of, I lived in Vancouver most of my life, and I had spent a lot of time in London as well when I was doing music, and then as well as New York, but those cities were never really a reality for me financially, because I couldn't really, I didn't have the money to kind of keep up a practice like I wanted to there. And when I discovered Berlin, that's not fair to even say it's financial. But when I came to Berlin after many years of thinking London and New York were like the Mecca, you know, and I came to Berlin and realized, like, I didn't know, I couldn't believe I'd waited so long to get there, you know. I arrived in Berlin, and here was this city that was like embracing forward-thinking music and forward-thinking art, and had this incredible amount of space and incredible low price point for everything, you know, and so it was just a very, very obvious thing to do for me once I finally discovered this place. And it just really, it doesn't necessarily, I don't know, people ask that all the time, if the city inspires me, and like, I guess, but the one thing the city gives you is time, you know, and there's nothing more valuable to an artist than time, and so it gives you the time to be inspired, and the space, I think. It's changing, obviously, but I think everywhere is changing, so.
When you moved to Berlin, were you still mainly doing music, or were you at that point?
No, it was like right near the tail end of that. It was I moved here at the end of 2007, and by the end of 2009, I had stopped with music. But yeah, it was right at the, like it was kind of that year that made me decide to stop, because I was working with a band and we were on tour, and I just got really quite burnt out by it.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like it just wasn't working for me.
Mm-hmm.
So that, it's funny, yeah, because that was one of the key things when I first came to Berlin, was like the embrace of challenging music, and yeah, just so. It's also a funny thing, because when I arrived in Berlin, I almost, I kind of, it's not like I stopped going out or anything, but I stopped, I didn't like go wild, with the abundance of nightlife, etc. It was like, it's a funny city because everything's quite relaxed, because you can have everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas in a city like Vancouver, there's so many bylaws and restrictions, etc., that it breeds this real anxiety in the nightlife.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Let's see if there's one more question. Sorry. I flipped by mistake. Hey. Okay. Okay. Do you want to go? Can you see the questions as I'm scrolling?
Yeah.
Do you want to pick one?
Oh, wait. I'm just reading friends from Vancouver who are agreeing with me. My question, please. Do you know which the question was from Akirat Bangat? Do you have a question?
From who? Sorry. Can you see? I can see like a list of questions here.
Oh, I don't for some reason. Oh, there. I'm not seeing those. You.
Oh no, sorry.
Turn off the.
No. The hierarchy of language. Okay,
oh,
yeah.
sure. Is there a hierarchy?
Let me bring it up here. Is there a hierarchy to the language of transcendental representation? How about alternatives?
Is there a hierarchy to the language of transcendental representation? I don't know. I mean, it's funny. Like that's the vortex. This transition will never end. The thing I'm talking about there is that we've accepted this representation. Like everyone agrees, this is what it looks like when you go into another reality, or when you travel through time, etc. But as in a hierarchy to the language, I think that in general, people who are attempting to illustrate or represent altered states in are frowned upon, is considered kitsch, and is considered it's considered kitsch, even though they're oftentimes incredible technical renderers, etc. So I think there's a hierarchy in that it's not taken seriously a lot of the time. That you have someone like Alex Gray, who's like this remarkable illustrator of psychedelic experiences, and yet he's definitely not considered. I don't know what you would even call that now, but it's certainly not taken seriously in the contemporary art world. So I think there is definitely a hierarchy in how people perceive this, which I think is unfortunate, because I think that some of that work is totally remarkable. And also, I mean, a lot of my work in the past had been about the difference between a scientific imaging of, say, brain scans of people having transcendental experiences or on psychedelic drugs, compared to the representation by people who have experienced these things, some of these psychedelic artists, and combining this. I did work where I was attempting to combine science and this type of kitsch illustration. So as far as alternatives, I don't know.
Yeah,
but maybe I don't know. I think maybe there should be more dialogue between these areas. I don't think that psychedelic art should be considered something totally. It shouldn't be debunked and kind of treated as as kind of outsider, or even
Yeah.
not even outsider, but as kitsch and as, or just not really. It's just not really considered, you know, in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. They're mentioning a film by Gaspar Noé, Climax, as an example, and
Climax.
yeah,
Climax doesn't really have any psychedelic. They're thinking of Enter the Void, I'm pretty sure.
yeah, yeah.
Funny
Probably
story.
Enter the Void.
Funny story about Enter the Void is that I gave Gaspar Noé DMT for the first time. So.
And the whole movie is about DMT.
It's about DMT. No, he was already looking for it, but no, he'd never taken the drug. But sorry, what did he say? That's a bad example. It's pop film. I don't see.
Anyway, it was a good
yeah.
mention, because Gaspar Noé is totally in the subject. Are there other films or kind of music things that?
Oh yeah, they do take. I'm just reading this response. Yes, they do take LSD, but there's no attempt to illustrate. There's no attempt to the illustration of LSD is really just in their behavior. There's no. He's not attempting to represent it in a way that goes beyond their physical movement. Yeah, but if you want to watch Gaspar doing attempts to illustrate altered states, then Enter the Void does a very, very good job. I mean, that is advanced CGI.
Yeah. All right, cool. I think we're out of questions now.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jeremy. Is there anything else that you think we should mention about the show, or we've covered it? I think.
Yeah.
Quite
I mean, it's
thoroughly.
it's like we said in the beginning. It's not a huge. It's a show that's kind of a sum of its parts. It's not really. It wasn't intended as a show to launch any new work or discussion, but a bunch of works from the past.
Exactly. It covers 12 years.
12 years.
Yeah.
Crazy.
All right, Jeremy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a nice Saturday.
You too.
Yeah, let's
talk to you.
Be in touch.
Okay.
Bye,
Thanks
everyone.
everybody who was watching.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Calvin and Brian and.
Yeah, you can do shout outs now. This is your moment.
Richard and Nate and Brian and whoever else was there. Thanks for watching.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.